Now I have to go back, where was I? Okay, yeah. And now, what they have said is for the fact that both the children have to go through college and then getting married is a final act of financial and career fulfillment. But what that means is all the little, either A, like Catholic girls and boys schools, everything's kept totally apart, or B, anytime you have a relationship, it becomes insincere and transitory. It's all temporary, and therefore, for the short term, you're getting together with somebody for some short-term purpose. And nothing of substance really is drawn out. So again, the substance in relationships are something that you do not see in some of the teen films. You don't have well, I'll let that come by for another discussion, because I could go on for a while on that, but I think that there are some books and some people who have done some extra work on that, and it should be looked into more seriously. And I think film artists should actually use this aspect of our changing culture to actually use as a plot bunny for any number of different ways to explore the same situation. But that's just one area of plots. Looking at things a little bit more as a film art, as they say, there's just so many plots in the world to go around. But the point is, society changes, people change, how the mechanisms and not only the social structures, but the mechanics of how we communicate change. And so all of a sudden that adds to a lot of different dynamics. I mentioned about the similarity between the telephone and the texting, but yet at the same time, you have internet, you have people they call it cheating by internet chat room. But how does that change the relationship at home, and how does that relate to a few things? Again, these are a little bit more plot bunnies to be explored by film artists who just says, well, there's something here, we need to tell a story, and that's what an artist does. He says, I have this story inside me, and I really need to have it expressed, and I need to do it somehow. Again, there was one anime that does that, tells that side of the teenage artist very, very strongly. Shoot, I forgot the name of that one too. But yeah, when I started talking about the earlier films, and filmmaking, like everything else, you always stand on the shoulders of the people before you. Right now, anime has the hot hand, especially in the writing and production, but again, it lacks the dynamics of live action. But if you hear Ranma or some of the other shows, they do a lot more with sound effects. It's much more about the dialogue. And so when the faces are still, but the lips are moving a bit, you're listening to what's going on. So it's much more about the writing and directing of the story and how it's portrayed. That is one of the huge things about it. But yet at the same time, in the 80s, in my view, especially because Great Britain was taxing people and then making their own productions, the BBC had the huge hot hand in writing a production series, and people still awesome at Doctor Who, Upstairs, Downstairs, All Creatures Great and Small. And people were able to relate and work with these things. In the 70s and 60s was the really hot hand for television. And television was able to do something that comic books in general do, and that's act as a creative nursery for new ideas. They would have a movie that would just explore, and maybe it would be good, maybe not, but maybe there was something there that says, oh, let's make a TV series out of this. Oh, nope, that won't work. But at least they brought it by. At least they decided to go out and say, here it is. And film for the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s was the main element. But when I talk about pop culture, we always think, or film, we always think of Gone with the Wind, the great movies, the great comedies. But most important movie to me that had me go wow was a little known or almost forgotten movie, The Blob. Why would The Blob be such a hit as a B-movie pop culture? Does anybody know? Okay, when I talk to some of the people, it says, yo, what is the show about? It was about this blob that ran around. Okay, how many lines did the blob have? None. How much action did the blob have? Well, it just kind of moves it around. Okay, is that what made it a hit? No. What you had was for the fact that the two kids, of course they were hugely, Steve McQueen and his co-star, were hugely, hugely talented and became huge mega movie stars. But that was only part of it. But what they saw was something land, they saw it eat the neighbor, they saw it, you know, going around, and so they tried to tell the parents, they tried to tell the sheriff, they tried to tell everybody about this monster that's going to eat everybody. Nobody listened. Well, what happens if you have a movie where Chicken Little was right, and you're telling kids, you know what, if you see something going on, and you believe in it, and you know what's going on, speak up because it could save somebody's life. What message like that do you have where everybody's talking about the conformity and we're pulling back from helping people go to that next level up? And again, that's part of knowing your film history. Now, there's another little anecdote that I really like. It's from what I consider to be the very best superhero show ever done, called Read or Die. And that's about two superheroes, one who has complete control over paper. She's a little bit of an airhead, but I'll tell you what, she'll kill you and smile. So be careful, just because somebody's a little light and friendly and easygoing doesn't mean they don't have a serious side to them. And her partner can go through matter. Now the relationship between these two superheroes who become partners is one has a realistic but sad point of view of love, the other has the idealistic book and romantic view of love. But after they first started meeting, they pull a joke that's 70 years old. But they work with it in such a way that they make it work. And that's when the paper goes off because this villain had stolen her book and she chased the guy down and he throws the book off and she jumps in the air and catches the book in midair, and on her way down her coat gets stuck on the spike on the Statue of Liberty. Now her partner's sitting there going, that was a dumb thing to do. What's more important, your book or your life? 70 years ago, okay, you had a guy who was, whose main persona was being a skinflint. And a thief would come up and go, stick 'em up, your money or your life. Come on, I'm thinking. Same joke, but it works, but yet it works in a different context. And that comedian was Jack Benny, by the way. And again, it's these, when I look at some of the pop culture and when I look what seems to be the next phase where some of the anime seems to be going passe, are the video games. And one of the things that I feel sad about is for the fact that even though the video games are being more movie-like and more like interactive movies, They really don't have the humor, they really don't have some of the strong dialogue, and I was hoping that some of the video games were going to go the way of one of my favorite anime, which is Dot Hackside. Because there you had 4 or 5 video games, and you had 3 or 4 different TV series or direct-to-videos about the this interactive game world. But the first series dealt with it in a very different way, where you had real people, even though they were drawn at certain points when they show their real-life persona. Real-life people meeting in the game world and having all the aspects of an online community. You had the troll, you had the more mature person, you got the guy who was always a bit of the chip on the shoulder with a little bit of a punk attitude. You had a couple people who entered the game as novices but actually grew, developed, and because they had these relationships with other people, even it had to be in a game world, they actually grew. And you know, so this is the sort of thing that, again, I wish they would do. And when you see certain anime films that are done by Hollywood, the Guyver did a pretty nice job with its show, but when you see the Dragon Ball Z movie recently, it lacked some of the humor because part of the early Goku sagas were the fact that his social graces and his knowledge about male-female relations is not even 0, it's -5. And all the little comic faux pas that could be made, or some of the other things, or what it's like when he was, you know, talking about things, they missed some of the character elements. I will say that coming up, and I'm going to make a prediction, they're still talking and they're working on a Cowboy Bebop movie. Now, if they get it right in a certain way, I think it'll be a hit. If they do what they did with Dragon Ball Z, I think that they might miss it. And that is, go to what the writer and director of the yearly show meant and what he was trying to do. And again, it's about characters, setting up the characters first. Because if the characters don't match, then what you have a monster called Godzilla, done by Hollywood, that makes no difference from the, no similarity whatsoever with the Japanese Godzilla, and where many times, because even though he was on his own, Godzilla was still fighting a monster that was going to destroy the earth, there was at least a reason to root for him, you know. But the American Godzilla movie, he was just a monster out to squash things, and so there was nothing really to root for them, so there was no depth to the movie. But the same thing is true for the for Bebop, because Spike is 3/4 laid back, very intelligent, aware of what's going on all the way around him, Humphrey Bogart. But he's got a 25% Clint Eastwood chip on his shoulders. If you push me too far, I'll still beat you. He's got that little smirk on his face on the dialogue. If they miss that,